through the years that I was working a lot, I mean, weekly with addiction interruption, people coming for that, and I was doing the work and training people. I was always really amazed. And when I would do an interview, I would always mention how interested I was in the fact of how profoundly effective it was for eliminating craving for alcohol. But of course, initially, first, people would come and they would literally, their bodies would be shaking for 3 or 4 days, 2 to 3 days maybe, because they would have to go through the DTs, the shakes, to detox if they were severe alcoholics before they were eligible to do an Iboga experience. They would have to wait a good week or 10 days. Now it's 2 weeks because we're much more cautious now. And the protocols administering for addiction interruption has changed. And they're, just more thorough. And, every generation is standing on the previous generation's shoulders and, learning more here in the West and then sharing it with people. So yeah, I'm very thrilled about how it helps people, rid themselves of the scourge of alcoholism. It's great.
Now, what about fentanyl? Would it help with that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. It saves people's lives. But first, as with kratom, but for different reasons, people need to be off of the fentanyl for a couple to a few days. So when a person, that's why it takes sometimes a week to spend time, because the provider is going to stabilize a person off of something like, for example, kratom or fentanyl, and stabilize them on something like morphine for a couple to a few days before they're eligible safely to do Iboga for addiction interruption.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's very individual, and the EKGs are very individual, and the way to work with addicts and psychospiritually, but the psychospiritual and therapeutic sessions are individualized, but in a much lighter, much easier, much non-threatening fashion. In other words, as I introduce the medicine to someone over a period of 6.25 to 7 hours, we determine how much to give according to their experience with the medicine from hour to hour, and more is not better. I know this culture is so, enculturated to think otherwise, but that needs to be thrown out the window, because the goal is to be able to go as deep and explore as possible. And if you take too much too fast, you don't have the ability to explore that deeply. And if you go too slow and you don't take enough, then there's not as deep an exploration as you want to have. So there's a quote unquote sweet spot for every individual. And that's what we do during the session. We determine very clearly between the assistant, myself, and the person that's under the covers, so to speak, with their eyes closed in the semi-dark room, having the experience. And we collaborate. And of course, the person has the last word, that person receiving the experience. But there's always seems to be a collaboration and an understanding that this is the amount. And the amount is very, very slightly different between one person and another. I mean, there is a range that's extensive, but basically, it's very close together.